Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your powerful introduction. And good morning, all. Warm morning greetings. And I hope we are all filled with a lot of energy to conserve energy. Uh, I also like to thank Sanjay Kaur sir, for inviting me for this presentation. Thank you, sir, for inviting me to be part of this session. I hope there have been plenty of sessions with a lot of discussions and a lot of insights during these 5 days, and I'm happy that I'm able to contribute some of the ideas during this session. Uh, my topic is on today's topic is on decarbonizing with solar PV with variety of applications of solar PV. So we're going to look into what are the different applications solar PV is possible. So this is little bit deviated from the current topic. However, they are correlated. There is a very strong relationship and interdependencies. But however, from the energy conservation point, we will have some common linkages as well. So with this, the agenda of my talk is going to be just for 30 seconds. I'm going to introduce my company and myself, and then jump on to setting up the context for today's presentation, the background, and then why we are going for solar, and there are what are the classification and its applications, which is going to be the main part of my presentation, and then on the different investment modes and some of the case studies of the real-time installations in India, and then I might spend 10 minutes for a Q&A and discussion. I think my given time is until 1 o'clock, so I hope to finish by 12:45, so that we can have some 10-15 minutes good amount of discussions from all the participants. So this is going to be the agenda for the session. So about us, Mangala Smart Energy Solution is in existence from 2008. We are a company who specializes in renewable energy and energy efficiency. We do conduct energy audits, so I'm aware of all the energy audit and conservation activities as well. So on top of that, we are also specialized in rooftop solar waste heat recovery projects. We also work with different government agencies in government projects as well as private clients. We also work in training segment as well. So these are the different areas our company is involved in. Our head office is located in Tamil Nadu, but we do have a branch office in Maharashtra and Delhi as well. So this is just a little bit background about our company and what we do. So let me jump on to setting up the background, right? So we all aware there are plenty of reasons for us to go for energy conservation, energy audit, and one of the main reasons is the climate change. And we are all aware of the different consequences of climate change: forest fire, drought, monsoon or a flood, cyclones, and how it affects our life, the people, migration happening due to that, and people's livelihood getting affected due to this. So I think we all are very well aware about the different consequences of the climate change, and I see all our activities of energy conservation or renewable energy, the climate change and the consequences of the climate change as the founding parameters or the reasons why we are into this area and why we try to change the status quo. And this is just a simple definition. Climate change referring to any change in the Earth's climate of a region or a city, whereas the global warming talks about the increase in the average temperature only. Climate change includes all the different parameters of climate, that can be temperature or it can be rainfall or anything, but global warming refers to average temperature, because I see a lot of time in the professional discussion also people use the global warming and climate change vice versa, but it is typically there are two different concepts. Yes, current global warming is also part of the climate change which is happening, but the climate change, it is not only global warming. We have a lot of other issues like changing in rainfall pattern and rising sea level. All those different concepts are happening. So but there are some other people who do ask the questions, is it really happening because of the human interventions, or is it really happening? So there are a lot of evidence already available now. I think we have already crossed the area where we were in a dilemma that if it is or yet because of the climate change or climate warming, there are clear evidence from different studies as well as the current observations that the temperature is increasing. We are nearly 1 degree centigrade higher than our average temperature. There are plenty of evidence from different studies from NASA or Japanese Meteorological Agency and different agencies. Similarly, with the other proof or the evidence is because of the high temperature, you can also see the summer sea ice extent has been depleting. So which was in 11 million or 11.5 million kilometer square. So it is nearly like 1 crore kilometer square of area in ice area in Arctic during the summer. It has dropped to nearly half, 50%. So nearly 5.5 million kilometer square we came to. So this clearly shows the increasing temperature and melting of ices, which automatically constitute to the next parameter, which is the increase in the sea level. So this is also very evident with all the data available. So this is happening. We are very clear that climate change is happening and the consequences of climate change affecting people's life. It is very clear. But what causes the climate change? I think we are all aware that major contributor for the climate change is the greenhouse effect, whereas the sunlight coming from the sun is trapped into the atmosphere because of the layer of gas which is formed on top of the atmosphere. We can even compare the Mars and Venus, and because of the greenhouse gas layer on top of the Venus, there is a temperature difference, and when there is no layer, you can see the Mars. So you can, if we can see those plants, that is also clearly evident that this rise in temperature or climate change is happening due to the trapping of the heat energy or infrared radiation, which is being sent back from the sun, reflected back from the earth surface, which is not able to escape because of this greenhouse gases. And the major contributor of the greenhouse gases in the sector wise, it is energy sector. 72% is contributed by the energy sector. There are other areas like industrial processes, waste, agriculture, land use change and forestry, but the majority is in the form of energy sector. So this is a primary concern for all of us, for human as well as all the living beings safety, that we act on this area. That is why energy is been given importance, and that is the reason why we are going for energy conservation or energy efficiency or renewable energy as well. So if you take from the sources, coal energy contributes nearly, today it has been reduced still further, but still somewhere in the range of 1 kilogram of CO2 per unit of electricity, whereas natural gas is less than half of it, 450 grams of CO2, whereas solar is very less, 30 grams of CO2 per unit of electricity. So this is the different CO2 emissions by the energy sources. So this is clearly indicating why we need to go for solar in order to address the climate change. Yes, one of the steps is to surely go for energy conservation or energy audit and try to reduce or eliminate all the wastages. But however, it will not be possible for any of us to come to a state where there is no consumption of energy. That is not possible. We might reduce the consumption of energy, but we still will have consumption of energy which we need to cater, and that is where this renewable energy source can contribute. If you take the percentage wise in 2019 in global primary energy, for electricity only, fossil fuels contributed for 63%, whereas low carbon contributed for nearly 37%. Whereas if you take the total energy, it is still nearly 84% is coming from fossil fuels. So that we again can see how it is linked with the greenhouse gas emissions. So these are the some of the fundamentals why we need to go for solar energy and other renewable energies as well to reduce the total fossil fuels we are consuming and the energy consumption. So if I take the India's electricity production, this is also in line. Nearly still 80% of us coming from the fossil fuels. Our renewables or solar is just 1 or 2% in the total production, electricity production. So there is a huge scope for us to go into this. In spite of our taking a lot of measures on energy conservation, we will still have huge amount of consumption in which we can address through this method. The other point why we need to go for solar is on our current per capita energy consumption. So when we grow, currently our per capita energy consumption is somewhere around 6,500 kWh. This is total, both electricity and other energies combined, whereas the world average stands at 17,730. So other countries stands around, Canada stands around 1 lakh kWh. So we have a plenty of way to go. When we grow, we will surely consume more and more energy, and our per capita energy consumption is going to increase, where the energy conservation will help us to make it as less as possible. But however, we will still be growing and with our energy consumption, and we need to have appropriate energy mix in our portfolio to address the climate change effect or other issues which we will face. So luckily we have been blessed with the solar resources from sun, and most of our country is blessed with it, and so why not we take advantage of it. In 1 square meter we have been given in an average 5.5 kWh equivalent energy every day by the sun. So in 1 square meter we can have 5.5 units of units equivalent energy given by sun. It is just for us to apply the proper technology to convert and use it. So the other point with this, I will finish on the introduction part of why we need to go for solar, and then we can jump on a little bit on the discussions on the applications. So the other question, pyramid question is one, yes, we have been gifted with the solar resources, and it can help us to contribute our future demand, and it can also help us in reducing the climate change, but also will it save money? That is also a pyramid question, because if it is a very expensive, it is not affordable for us or affordable for consumer, that is also going to be a challenge. But I think today solar also has broken that glass ceiling, and today the prices has fallen well below the regular coal or fossil fuel consumptions. In December, the recent tenders, we were able to achieve 1 rupees 99 paise per unit of electricity from solar, which is very, very cheap when compared to the fossil fuels, which stand somewhere in the range of 3.5 rupees. So we have been drastically reducing our prices in the solar electricity, so which is a very, very good news, and I think it provides us a ray of hope for us to go ahead in our energy sector. So now with this introduction, it proves a point. What I wanted to communicate was that energy conservation and renewable energy both goes hand in hand to meet the future's demand for energy, because we will surely increase our energy consumption, and we need to make it as a green energy, and whenever it is possible we have to reduce our consumption as well. So both need to go hand in hand, and the solar technology can be one of the solutions. There are other renewable energy solutions as well, which I'm not going to cover today, but in solar we can still have a thermal technology also, and I understand there is going to be a speaker. I think I'm not sure if it is already over or it's going to be tomorrow, but there is a session on solar for thermal applications as well. So you will be hearing more from that end from the speaker. So I am going to be talking more on how solar can be applied in wherever the electrical energy is required, and how we can utilize it in different form, different applications. That is going to be the major part of my discussion. So I am not going to go too much deep into the technical part of how solar chemistry works or solar panel works and what is the chemical working of it. But just to give in a nutshell, when the photons of the sunlight reaches the solar cells, it makes the electrons in the material to flow, and the flow of electrons making an electrical current, and all the different cells flow of electron is combined in the module, and as an output it is given. So a photon from the sunlight energy is converted into electrical energy and being supplied. That is the basis of this solar photovoltaic energy, whereas solar thermal works based on the heat energy principles, and this works based on the light energy principles during the conversion. So with this basic, I'm going to go on the different classifications. I think this is the slide I'm going to be repeating for few times during this presentation, because this classification gives us the different possibilities of the applications of solar. There are various types of classifications in solar. This classification, I have created this classification based on my practical understanding in the industry. There are a lot of theoretical models as well, but I think this covers the very wide range of practical applications in the present in the industry. It also covers the different types of application. Is it a DC current or a AC current application? Then it also covers if it is with energy storage or without energy storage. Then it also covers if it is directly interacting with the grid or it is not interacting with the grid. So these different aspects of the system has been considered when deriving at this classification diagram. So I'm going to be using this diagram to explain about the various applications and some of the examples of these various applications during the session. So let me start with the starting point where the DC application. In the DC application, where we directly consume DC energy, and there are two types of it, without energy storage and with energy storage. We're going to look into it just in a minute. And I have just given all the brown ones are about the different practical systems which they are in the market. So I have mentioned those things, and I will be talking about that in a minute. So the other classification is on the AC side. In the AC side, I have classified further based on if it is interacting with the grid or if it is not interacting with the grid. I have not put that in the DC application simply because our grid is AC in most of the areas. So that is why it is not considered off grid. It is completely DC is considered typically as an off grid. That is why I have not put off grid, on grid, or hybrid in the DC application side. Only in the side of AC, I have further classified into off-grid, on-grid, and hybrid systems of applications. So with this, I'm just going to jump on to, first we will start with the DC application. So in solar PV DC application, we can have systems which is without any energy storage. You don't need to have batteries. You can have systems which is a directly looped systems, as shown in the first block diagram on the top. You can have a so you can have this PV array connected to the DC line. One of the example is the solar DC fan, where the solar panels power generator is directly supplied to the panel without any intermediary, and whenever there is a sunlight, the fan will run, and whenever there is no sunlight, the fan will not run. There will not be any energy storage. If required, there might also be some controller to change the voltage, and if required, if for both of the same technical parameters, that controller also may not be required. But similar, another application of similar DC application without energy storage will be of the solar DC pump. In this solar panel, the power generated from the solar panel is come to the pump enhancer or a DC controller, where it controls or enhances the power to the required voltage or required settings, electrical settings, and then supplied to a DC pump, and then water is pumped out of it. So here again, there is no interaction with the grid, or there is no battery storage. It is simply a without grid interactive system, and where it is a completely works in the DC current. There is no AC current involvement in this setup as well. So this is another application of solar. This I think solar DC fan application is also picking up in the market, especially in the rural areas or in the farmhouses, where they are setting up small for the cabin of the security guard or other people in the daytime if they need some fan system or things. This type of arrangements are made these days. Then the next will be, okay, let's slide. Okay, so the next classification is the solar PV DC application energy storage. In this, of the direct load, you also have battery. So the previous systems can only work during the sun hours, they cannot work during the night hours, whereas this system with energy storage DC applications can work during the night hours. And it is the additional component in this is the battery, and this is very widely used these days in all the roads and transports, and also a lot of solar batteries are all available today. Solar torch light or solar street lights, and the solar street light has been widely used, and the DC street light is the most commonly used street lights these days. And so it just have a panel, a smart controller, and a battery, so that it can charge the energy in the daytime, and it can switch on the light automatically or manually in the night, and where it consumes the energy. So I am not giving all the different possible applications. I'm just giving you one examples of applications in each classification, so that we can have some points of discussion on the end regarding those. So again, the next one will be on the AC application. If you go back to this classification, we are going to talk about the AC application and especially the off-grid systems. The difference between the off-grid and on-grid system is here, even though the output usage is in the AC form, still there will not be any interaction with the grid. That is what I mean by off-grid system. So DC application also, in that way, it is an off-grid only, but here we are talking about AC current off-grid system. Here there are again with energy and without energy. So in AC application, off-grid, without energy storage, again the solar pump is the example. Solar AC pump. In the DC pump, there is just an enhancer or a controller, whereas in the AC pump there is an inverter as well, VFD, which converts the DC into AC, also available for the application. So this is again a very commonly used application for agriculture, where most of the pumps are AC pumps, grid interactive pumps, where you can simply set up this solar pumping system using the PV panels and an inverter. It just inverts the DC into AC. So this is one of the applications in the off-grid module. Here there is no energy storage as well. The other one off-grid application in the AC with energy storage is for some greenhouses and other places where they are only dependent on solar panels. There is no electricity, but there is a charge controller which stores the power coming from panel into the battery bank, and then inverter using that battery bank to supply to the power required in AC houses. This is typically used in the areas, remote areas, or non-grid connected areas for application, their application, whereas all the appliances are AC. So using an inverter, this type of systems are available, and there are plenty of retail systems are available in this market as well. So now coming to the on-grid system and the hybrid system, they are the most widely used type of systems in the industry. So I'm going to be talk more onto them and more on the on-grid system itself, less on the hybrid as well, because they are the very much commercially used systems. So I'm going to be talk about all the tricks and of the industry on this. So on-grid system typically is without energy storage. Here you directly interact with the grid and you do not have energy storage. If in an on-grid there is an energy storage, then it is considered as an hybrid system. Otherwise, it is considered as an on-grid system. So on-grid with the battery storage, we will be talking a little bit later, but we are looking at on-grid system without energy storage at this stage. So the first and the most important ones in the application is in the rooftop power plant. This is a doesn't have any energy storage. The output is coming in the AC form for all the load to use it. Here the components are solar panel, power is coming to the inverter, and from the inverter it is linked with an electric service panel, from where it is being supplied to the loads, and there is also a net meter available for noting down if there is a bidirectional flow from the uh, solar. So if we produce excess energy from solar, it is possible to supply to the utility. If we do not have enough supply from the solar, it is possible to take from this utility. So then we need a bidirectional meter for noting down the import as well as export. So this is the most commonly used type of system in the rooftop solar segment. And in this, again, the on-grid inverter is synchronizing with the existing electricity from the EB. So it has to synchronize with the exact parameters on the voltage, frequency as well, in order to avoid any mishap when there is a synchronization. So the inverter always takes a signal from the electrical panel to understand what is the current voltage and the frequency, and it produces its output on the same range, and then it combinedly supplies to the uh, load. Whereas in this, there are different modes of operation. The system is similar, but there are 4 different modes of operation available in India at the moment, depending on the state you are from. Each state or the DISCOM have different policies on how this system can work or how they can calculate the bills for this system. This is very important for us to understand, because when we go for an audit or when we suggest a solar system to an industry, typically most of the time it is going to be rooftop solar, or else it is going to be utility solar power. So it is better for us to understand what are all the principles behind it, or what are all the calculation methods behind these systems, so that we can suggest accordingly to the clients. So the first 2 methods of calculations in the on-grid rooftop system is net metering or feed-in tariff. These are the first 2 methods of calculation. Depending on the state you are in, this method is applied. So it is important for us to, when we prepare an energy audit report with a suggestion of solar for the client, it is important for us to understand which area or which type of tariff their state is in, and also there might be different tariffs for different consumer categories. For industry category, for a commercial category, for a residential category, there might be different tariff structure. So in which type of tariff structure this client comes in, so what we can recommend to them, that is very important for us to understand. So I'll give you an example. For example, in the net metering, what happens is, so the system can have solar panels, inverter, and the meter. So in this, whatever power we are producing, the first we will use it ourselves through the load. If there is an excess power, we are sending it back to the grid, which is called as exported units. For example, if our power supplied by solar is not sufficient, then we import the power, that is called as import energy. So there are 2 variables, import energy and export energy. So in net metering, what happens is, the import energy in the month end when the billing happens, so the DISCOM separates the export energy from the import energy. For example, you have imported 1000 units and you have exported 500 units. Maybe you don't work on Sunday, so you produce additional solar energy on Sunday, which you have exported to the grid. So you have 500 units available with you, which you have exported to the grid, whereas you have imported, for example, let's assume 1200 units you have imported from the DISCOM during the daytime, or in the evening, or in the night time you have imported 1200 units. Then 500 units is subtracted from the 1200 units, and so the balance is 700 units, and you will be charged for the 700 units. So if your charges are 10 rupees, then you have to pay 7000 rupees. This will be under the net metering calculations. Whereas in the feed-in tariff calculation, what happens is the same import and export is recorded. So 1200 units of uh, import and 500 units of export, whereas the calculation method differs. So whatever additional energy you have exported to the grid, they are not at the same price value as the imported energy. So government gives a different price value. For example, it might be 5 rupees or 3 rupees. For example, in Tamil Nadu today, the exported energy is purchased at 2 rupees 20 paise, whereas imported energy is billed at 7 rupees. So there is a difference in the tariff between the imported energy and exported energy. So after your self consumption, whatever energy you have exported to the grid, they will charge. For example, they for the same example of 1200 units import and 500 units export. So 1200 units at 10 rupees, they will charge you as 12,000 rupees, and the 500 units at 5 rupees, that is 2,500 rupees, they will subtract from 12,000 rupees. So your bill will be 9,500 rupees, whereas in the previous method your bill will be just 7,000 rupees. So you will be still paying excess amount because of this billing methodology. So when you are in feed-in tariff, your approach should be to plan that you do not export any energy. You should plan only for the daytime consumption, and also you should consider what is your peak consumption, and you have to, or peak or the regular base load consumption. So whenever we suggest a system based on the feed-in tariff or net feed-in mechanism, then we typically look at what is the base load of the consumer, and we design our system such a way that it only produces the base load at its maximum maximum energy production period also, because the solar energy production is a bell curve. So it will keep on increasing until the noon, and it will stop dropping again until the evening. So during the peak hours also it doesn't produce excess. In that way we formulate in order to have a better return of investment. So that is the reason. Whereas in the net metering, you can simply calculate what is the total monthly energy consumption, and for that energy consumption you can design a plan. For example, if I have a my energy consumption per month is 1250 units I consume, so then I can set up a 10 kilowatt power plant, because 1250 each kilowatt produces 125 units per month approximately. So I can simply set up a 10 kilowatt power plant. So even though my daytime consumption is only 500 600, the other unit I can export to the grid, and that can be tallied in the later. But during this net feed-in tariffs mechanism, it is not possible to do that, and we need to plan only for the base load. For example, if during my working hour my base load is only continuously it is 5 kilowatt hour, only my maximum demand or my base load demand, then I need to plan only for a 5 kilowatt power plant, even though my consumption is 1000 to 550 units, because I cannot supply in the night using the feed-in tariff mechanism. So both these types of system is available in India in different states. In addition to that, these are the two major type of billing systems available in India. There are plenty of other types of systems also available. Other one is called as gross metering. This is also there in some of the states, especially in Northeast, where the whatever energy is produced from the solar panels, it is directly exported to the grid using an export meter, and then whatever power you need you buy it from an import meter. So here in the previous method, you first use it for your self consumption, and then only you have a meter, the only the surplus you are sending it to the grid. Whereas in gross metering, whatever produced in solar, it is directly sold to the grid. Even at the same time, if you have consumption, you have to buy from the grid. That is called as a gross metering approach. This is also applicable in some states. In some places they might pay you more for solar power whatever you produce. In those places it is advantage with gross metering, but in other places today discoms are also making lot of loss, so they are also trying to reduce the power purchase price. So whatever export your power we are exporting, they are typically paid low where compared to the imported power. So in those scenarios gross metering is not effective. But if there are schemes by government where they incentivize you to produce on solar panels, and they give you based on your performance linked incentive type of schemes, then gross metering is a better approach. Then the other method of application is on the zero export mode, whereas you can connect the power plant, on-grid power plant, with the grid, but it is not possible for us to export to the grid. There have been because of the discount policies or the regulatory commission policies. So those type of for those type of systems, you need a circuit breaker as well as a smart logger in addition to the power solar modules as well as inverter. Because what you try to do is you try to sense if there is from the power meter or a suitable meter, you try to measure if there is any reverse power is coming to the power meter because of any excess production here. If there is any flow coming from the inverter side to the power meter side, if there is any excess power after the load coming to the power meter, then it will send a signal to the smart logger, whereas the smart logger will try to give information to the inverter and commands to reduce its production if it is excess. In case if that is not the case, if it is crosses beyond a particular limit, then the relay will be switched on and the circuit breaker will apply and the solar plant will disengage if the inverter is not able to control its power production. This is when the grid doesn't allow you to feed in any power. For example, in Tamil Nadu, for the HT connections, rooftop solar is allowed, on-grid is allowed, but it should not feed any power to the grid in that condition. So it should be a zero export mode. For that system, you need to have a smart logger, relay, and a circuit breaker in addition to your existing components to make sure you use all the power you produce. Otherwise, you reduce your production in the inverter itself so that you do not supply any excess power to the power grid. So this is also very commonly used for mostly for HT connections. So now the other major area, so the first one was the rooftop power plant, where it is we have wide variety of uh, requirements. The next one is on the front of utility scale power plants, where you set up a power plant somewhere outside and then you try to supply buy the same power by giving it in one place and buying it from the another place through the transmission network. So in this system, you are DC current in the solar panel is connected to the non-grid inverter. From the on-grid inverter, you can take for your own consumption in the big power park, solar park, and whatever the leftover power, you are having a transformer to step up the power to the required voltage and electrical parameters, and then you pump it to the external power grid. And so you also have a meter to note down how much power you have pumped into the grid, and then you can take that power or sell that power to the other party by transmitting through the network, where the transmission and wheeling charges will be applicable. So this is a basic set of uh, drawing for the utility scale power plant. This is also most widely commonly used systems. So before I go further on hybrid systems and financial modes and case studies, if there are any questions on the on-grid part on rooftop and utility scale power plant, I'll be happy to take some questions, because I think these are the most commonly used type of systems. The other ones are not that commonly used either for domestic applications or so, but for industrial applications, both rooftop and utility scale power plant is the methods used. I have not gone too much deep into technical parts of it, but however, I was talking on what are the commercially available applications and the systems, both from the components wise as well as from the policy wise as well. So any questions, anyone? All right. I think if there is no questions, then I will continue. I think too much silence also makes me
proceed,
worried
sir.
if
Please
the people
proceed.
are there or not.
Please proceed.
Great.
Yeah.
So yes. So the next classification is on the hybrid system. Hybrid system is where the solar system interacts with the on-grid, but or the grid, but at the same time, it also have an energy storage. It might feed into the grid or it may not feed into the grid. There are other two classifications within the hybrid, where in commercial terms we call it as off-grid hybrid and on-grid hybrid, where on-grid hybrid we feed into the grid in that system, and then off-grid hybrid we do not feed in. So this is an on-grid hybrid UPS where the inverter have a battery bank as well. So for a house, it produces from solar whatever power. So in this, the priority will be solar. When solar is not able to supply, then the inverter will take the power from the grid, and when the grid is not available or solar it is not available, then it will take from the battery bank. But in case if solar is producing more than what is required to store in the battery and consume in the house, then this system will also provide export its power to the meter, to the utility grid. So that is also possible. Some of the systems are approved by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in this method also. The additional advantage when compared to the on-grid system rooftop, and this is on-grid system doesn't work if there is a power failure. So that is one of the major issues. When there is a power failure, on-grid systems don't work. So these hybrid systems can work even when there is a power failure, and it still can export it to the grid. And also it can have a battery bank to supply additional power required during the power shutdowns. So that is the major advantage. This is not that widely used yet, but however, there are DISCOMs which have approved it, and it is being adopted by some of the commercial organizations in Bangalore and all those places. It is being started using up this technology. So it acts as an UPS as well as solar power plant, both combined. The other one is, it is called as off-grid hybrid UPS. The difference between the previous one, this one is, here there is a connection with the grid. So if there is not enough power available from the solar, then it will take from the grid, but however it will not export to the grid. It doesn't have the facility. The inverter cannot directly supply to the grid. It doesn't have return mechanism. So only when there is a power demand and which is not able to meet by solar panels, it will take from the grid. And if it is solar additional power is produced, then it has to be grounded. It cannot be supplied back to the grid. This is like a simple UPS with the solar panel in addition. This is also very widely used these days for domestic applications, where you don't need to invest on different system for a UPS and a solar panel, and you also don't need to go for getting a meter from the DISCOM, which is also a little bit tricky and challenging these days with all the approvals from the DISCOMs. So this is more appropriate for homes these days, where solar UPS doesn't require DISCOM approval. Then you can have a simple solar UPS, where with the panels you can reduce your power bills generating or electricity, and if there is that is not enough, it can be supported by grid and battery. And but only thing is, you cannot send to the grid any additional power you might generate. So these are the two types. One where you can supply it back or feed into the grid again, and the other one you cannot feed to the grid again. So these are the two major difference on of this hybrid systems, and in commercial terms we call it on-grid hybrid and off-grid hybrid UPS systems. So these are all the various methods I've been talking about on based on the energy storage and the interaction with the grid, and also on the policy front, what are all the different methods available. Then just looking at little bit on the commercial front from the investment modes, because when we create an energy audit report, typically we do include type of solar power plant suggested, and what type of payback, what type of investment modes available for those. So it is also important for us to understand the different investment modes as well as some financial details onto that. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And here again, I'm not going to cover about for all the different application or the technologies I've talked about or the configurations I've talked about. I'm going to only talk about rooftop solar as well as utility scale power plant, simple on-grid and utility scale power plant, which is widely used. Only for those modes I'm going to talk about different investment modes available, so that when you prepare an energy audit report, you can mention those things for the client on the report and you can give it to them. And also there are plenty of vendors available in these modes which whom you can suggest as well. So the first one is the capex model, where it is a simple purchase mode where the client purchases the power plant directly from the installer. So solar installer installs the power plant on the roof of the consumer, and the customer sets up a solar bidirectional meter in his premises, and he settles the bill with the utility grid directly. So there is no long-term collaboration of installer on the running of it. It is directly with the customer and the grid. It is just a buyback direct expenditure mode, where there are also today models available by a lot of vendors. So if anybody is looking for some suggestion on the vendors, I can give you a list of vendors who can do on the different modes as well for your audit reports. Direct capital expenditure, that is directly with the customer, and there are a lot of financing institutions today willing to support. SIDBI has a lot of schemes on solar power plant. The SBI has a $1 billion World Bank loan to support rooftop solar, and plenty of other banks are also supporting in this front. And there is another mode called as a deferred capex, where the capital, it will be on a capital mode, but the payment to the installer can be deferred for a period of 3 years to 5 years, where every monthly installment the customer will pay to the installer, but it has nothing to do with the grid. They will not get involved with the grid. They will only deal with the customer, and the customer has to pay monthly installments for their power plant. It is just like buying any washing machine or air conditioner in an EMI option. This is a simple EMI option for solar. These are the two modes which is typically done for a capex mode. The other one is on the RESCO mode or ESCO in energy service company, which is for energy efficiency we typically talk about. Similar mode is possible for solar, where they call it as RESCO. RESCO stands for nothing but renewable energy service company, where the ESCO company builds the system, it sells the power to the consumer, and so the consumer is paying to the ESCO company and not to the utility, whereas the ESCO company links with the utility and it takes care of all the interaction with the utility. For example, I'm setting up a plant, I am running an institution and I want a solar power plant. I can approach an ESCO player. So the ESCO player will come and set up a power plant on my roof, and we will have a fixed price. So he will say, okay, you pay me 5 rupees per unit of electricity we supply to you. So I will pay at the month end by looking at the meter how much ever we have consumed. I will pay him that much amount. Whereas if there is any excess power sent to the grid during the daytime or anything, I will be tallying it up with the utility directly. So that is the role of ESCO, and the ESCO will be bringing all the investment. They might link with the bank or investor. In this, there are two modes again: build, own, operate. Whereas you build the system, the ESCO build the system, they own the system, and they operate the system across the lifetime. And there is other model where they transfer the system after certain period of life to the client, 10 years or 15 years based on their agreement. So this is another model which is for the rooftop OPEX model. So these were the two main model, CAPEX and OPEX, and there are subtypes of systems available in the market. And so based on the client, if the client says I don't have that much capital or I'm not willing to go for that much investment at this stage, how I can still go green, you can suggest them to go for OPEX model. And there are plenty of suppliers available today in OPEX model for solar who can install on client's rooftop and then take energy. Then The third model is for the utility scale power plant. This is not for the on-grid rooftop, but this is for utility scale power plant, where you have a big solar farm in one place, and then through transformer and the grid you supply to the substation, supplying grid substation, and from there the power is again sent to the distribution substations. And so you can give a power in one place and you can buy the power in another place. But whereas, let us say A is the power producer and the B is the client, there is one mode, whereas captive mode, whereas the client itself can with its own investment can set up a power plant somewhere in a remote area. If there is not enough space available in his campus, in some remote place, he can set up a power plant. And then through this method of open access is nothing that you can openly access the grid infrastructure by paying a very nominal charge per unit of electricity to the grid managing company, and then you take that power in your particular location. Whereas if it is the same company which is installing the power plant as well as the client, then it is a captive power plant, then there is no billing issue, anything. You just need to settle your charges for using the power infrastructure or grid. Whereas the other method is group captive. In group captive, let us say 5-6 companies come together and they set up a solar park in one area, and again through the grid, each of one of us take the power for their factory. Then they can have an arrangement and agreement so as to how they can share the power, or else how they can pay more cost for power among themselves. That is group captive. Whereas if this power producer and the client, if they both are different parties, and then it is also possible to come to a third party arrangement where they can directly, the power producer can sell the power to the client and the client can pay the money to the producer through an agreement called as power purchase agreement, PPA mode, and that is on a third party sale. So one person is selling to a third party on a completely commercial mode. They just need to pay the charges for using the substation and the grid infrastructure. So all the three models are available and already in use in India. All these three models are widely used for a utility scale power plant. And the other mode can be to set up a power plant and sell it to the utility. That is I'm not covered into this here because that is a different scope for setting up a power plant itself or selling to the grid, but that I am not covered. But these methods are very useful for the industries to adopt on this energy front, renewable energy very easily, and it is also easy for them to buy such a green powers even at a lower tariff when compared to the grid power. Even without setting up any investment or changing any putting anything on their roof, they can just find a person, a solar farm power producer who is willing to sell power to them, and they can buy power without making any changes into their existing system, but they will be still going for a green energy. That is possible today, and this is one of highly recommended systems, and we have typically recommended to a lot of our clients these systems when we go for an audit, so that we try to make them green, and this can give emphasis on the green energy more and more. That is the reason. So now coming to the case study part, there are plenty of case studies we have done, plenty of projects in utility scale and as well as rooftop solar. I'm going to be talking about only one case study, that is a rooftop solar project. This is an 100 kilowatt system installed on a tin metal sheet, roof sheet of the industry. So you can see the plant. Why I put this image was also another reason. You can see some of the shadows on top of the panel. So the location and the site selection is very, very important. This is we have put in spite of we knowing because they were under some scheme and they wanted some government incentive scheme, and they didn't have any other space available to put panel on their roof. So we have to go with it. But one of the preliminary points for us to consider when we select any location, on top of when you want to do energy auditing, is to consider if there is enough roof area available, if you are suggesting a roof area. And if you are suggesting a utility scale power plant, then please do consider if the policies in the state allows, because for example in Tamil Nadu, any consumer with less than 1 megawatt or energy consumption or sanction load cannot go for a utility scale power plant power purchase or a third party power purchase. They cannot go for that. Captive or third party, they cannot go if their sanction load is less than 1 megawatt hour. So similar policies might be applicable. So it is not very generically in your audit reports. We should consider all the rooftop options. We need to know a little bit of the policies and also its implications to suggest appropriate systems. And again, on the on-grid as well, we need to know if it is a net metering policy or a net feed-in or a gross metering or a zero export device, so that you design the system or you recommend the proper capacity of the system. You do not propose them a higher capacity or a lower capacity, because a lot of these days with the energy auditing report, they are going for the funding to the banks for their upgradation, and we see a lot of times the reports have these flaws where they have theoretically based on their total energy consumption, the audit report mentions a particular size, but when we go for analysis and submitting a quotation or reviewing it, it is not matching our existing policies, because they typically only do the technical analysis of how much they consume and how much the solar will produce, so how much solar power plant you have to install. But it doesn't work that simply. You need to consider the policy implications as well as regulatory permission implications, and then shadow free roof space available implication. That is also very important, because people, again, this company, the auditing team, they have recommended and the bank have funded them the loan, so that is why we have to go for 100 kilowatt, but they have not even considered the rooftop shadow free space available in that particular location. So that is another challenge. So you have to consider all these three parameters, and also the fourth parameter is on the financing part, which type of financing you can recommend them to take care of. So with this, this is an industry. We have set up an 100 kilowatt power plant. So it costed the industry around 35 lakhs at the time of installation. So there is an accelerated depreciation benefit, which you can again mention in your report. So the maximum accelerated depreciation income tax benefit is 40% per annum, which is applicable for solar. So after deducting the tax savings which they will have, so which will be somewhere around in the range of 9 lakhs or 8,75,000 rupees. So the net cost for the project for them will be 26 lakhs 25,000 rupees. So with this power plant, they will be able to produce nearly 1,50,000 units per annum. They will be able to generate 1,50,000 units of energy. So because when we installed, this was under net feed-in mechanism, so we need to consider what is their maximum consumption. So their base load consumption was somewhere around 90 kilowatt, but we have gone for 100 kilowatt. You can see that we have gone for net feed-in mechanism. I have told you that we need to consider what is the base load and select the plant appropriately, but the maximum output from a solar power plant is the 80% of the rated capacity. So when we put an 100 kilowatt plant, its typical maximum output will be somewhere in the range of 80 or 82 kilowatts, not more than that. So that is why we have gone for 100 kilowatt power plant, where their base load was somewhere in the range of 90 kilowatts. Then the other thing is, what is the savings because of this power plant? At a 7 rupees per unit for 1,50,000 units, they were able to save somewhere in the range of 10 lakh rupees per annum. So their simple payback, if you take into account the cost after the AD, that is just a 2.5 years. So today's solar power plants are very economical, and they are even both environmental and pocket friendly. So it is wise for us to suggest them these applications when we do energy auditing, not only the conservation or efficiency measures, but also alternative energy methods because the ultimate aim for us is to decarbonize their energy production as well, not only reduce their energy consumption and also to decarbonize, because we can never bring them to zero energy. That is what we need to keep in our mind. And so if you take the 25 years life cycle and taking into account all the degradation, production and other things, the cost per unit of electricity is just 77 paise, whereas they might be buying at 7 rupees now, whereas in other places, in some states in India, it is even 10 rupees for industries, whereas in Tamil Nadu it is 7 rupees. But if they put this power plant, the cost per unit of electricity will only cost them 77 paise. So it gives them an edge, not only environment wise but also competitors wise. They can reduce their production cost with by reducing the electricity utility bill, and there is a good amount of returns also, nearly 39% of return of investment if you take from the accelerated depreciation amount. Even without considering the tax benefits, it will be somewhere in the range of 30%, 25 to 30%, which is a decent returns. And again, their per kg per annum CO2 reduction, they are nearly 150,000 kgs per annum. They will be able to reduce on the carbon dioxide emissions of their systems. So this is one of the summaries, and if anybody is interested to have the financial calculation sheet for solar, I will be happy to share. Do drop us an email and I will be happy to share it with you or through the organizers, however it is convenient. Yes, so again, before I go to the Q&A, just a summary of all the discussion points which we had for the session. So the main purpose of us going for solar is to decarbonize their energy consumption, because energy conservation cannot bring it to zero. So we try to decarbonize through alternative energy sources, and solar is today very economical and pocket friendly. And there are various classification and application of the system. I have created that classification and shared it with you, because in market there are a lot of confusion, hybrid and all those things. But you have to understand, when you recommend or write an energy audit report for a client, what type of systems you need to promote or what type of systems you need to suggest. Typically it can be an on-grid system or an typically it is going to be an on-grid system. If it's a domestic, it is going to be a hybrid system. If it is street light application, then it can be a pure DC system. So these are the, and pump is of course an off-grid applications. So whereas for the industry, it is going to be purely on-grid at most of the time. In on-grid, either it can be a rooftop system or else a utility scale power plant, depending on the size of the clients. If it's an HT consumer with a bigger load and less space, then it is better to go for a utility scale power plant, where you set up a power plant outside in a rural area, and through the transmission network you supply to the grid. There again the costs are lower. For example, if you buy a third party power today in Tamil Nadu, the cost is solar power is somewhere in the range of 4.5 rupees, whereas if you buy it from the DISCOM, it is 7 rupees. So industries, HT consumers do tend to go for this type of third party power, because it is not only helping them to go green, but it also saves their money. Who doesn't want to save their money? So it is very easy to sell for them to go for this type of green power. Whereas if rooftop space is available and they are an LT consumer, and typically if their consumption is less than 500 kilowatt, we typically suggest them to go for a rooftop solar. So because in the rooftop solar you even save the cost further. You don't even pay the cost of 1.5 to 2 rupees which you are paying for the grid company for transmitting the power, transmitting and wheeling. So that is why you go for on-grid rooftop systems wherever it is possible. That should be the primary choice and primary recommendation. But do consider if the policy applicable in the state or the DISCOM is for net metering or net feed-in or gross metering or zero export, so that you can decide the capacity of the system based on that, not using a simple formula of how much kilowatt solar can produce per day, which is 4 units per day. 1 kilowatt can produce 4 units per day, so I need 100 units, so divided by 4, so I go for 25 kilowatt power plant. That is not as easy as that. You need to consider the policies as well, because if you put a power plant which is of excess capacity and then if the grid is also not taking it, then it is waste for the consumer. So these were some of the points to keep it in mind. Again, shadow free area is very, very important. You need to consider before you recommend that in your report. So these are all some of the points I think you need to keep it in mind when you are designing or suggesting a system. So with this, I will stop it here. I think I'm well on the time of 12:45. So I will be open for any questions and discussions now. Thank you.
Is there any questions from the participant? Please, you can ask directly or put into the chat box.
Very nicely, sir. You elaborated all the types of solar PV system. So one doubt is that what happens when go for the net metering whenever there is a grid failure. So total generation gets stopped actually. Nowhere it is being stored if it is only net metering. So what can be done for that? Are you getting my question?
So then the possibility, yes, sir, I'm getting your question, sir. So the reply is in two possibilities. The possibility one is to go for a hybrid system where in on-grid you can have battery storage. Those systems are available, so you can go for that. But it is not possible for a bigger size capacity plants because you cannot have that many battery capacities for bigger size plants. If it is a small or medium sized plants up to 10 kilowatt or 15 kilowatt, it is possible. There are also some installations in Delhi government buildings with 100 kilowatt using hybrid system where still the battery UPS will be supporting and on-grid will be functional even if there is a battery power coming to the inverter and it will be working. The other is to synchronize it with the DG set. It is possible to run the power plant in synchronization with DG sets. There are plenty of kits available today in the market where desynchronization can be done.
Okay. Great. Now at present, suppose in Maharashtra, the net metering system installed, they don't have any hybrid system. But storage can be added, but how it can be disconnected from the distribution system? Because it need continuous some supply. That inverter sends the supply that is to the grid, and on the basis it passes the generation to the battery or somewhere else.
Right, sir. For the existing on-grid inverter, to make it hybrid, only DG synchronization is the option. Because if you go the other hybrid system, in that all these facilities are inbuilt in the inverter itself. Because when power is failed, the inverter automatically cuts off any export power to the grid. It doesn't give any export power. Even if there is excess power produced by the solar, it dumps it in the ground, or it controls its power production itself, like a DC to AC conversion to the required amount only. So, but that may not be possible in the existing on-grid, because existing on-grid inverter doesn't have that facility. So you may not be able to control it in that way, sir. So once the power failed, it will fail. So if you are synchronizing with the grid DG synchronization, what it does is it again creates an export controller or an inverter control where it keeps sending signal to the inverter not to produce any excess power. So it sends the signals to cut off any excess production if you are syncing it with the DG set. With the existing thing, you can only do the DG synchronization very easily, not with hybrid. You cannot make it hybridized after it is installed as an on-grid set. You need to change the inverter to an hybrid inverter set.
Okay. Means you cannot add any electronics component or any to the existing inverters. It is not possible to retrofit. Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible. It is possible. The answer to your question in a technical sense, yes, it is possible. But it is approved brand available? No, because currently there is no approved brand available, either an on-grid available or a new hybrid available. Existingly, to make the existing on-grid to existing hybrid, you can use electronic components to do it, and some people have done it as well. They have done some lot of R&D. They have come out with products as well, but they are not yet approved by the ministries to use it. That is what I meant to say. Commercially not available, but technically available, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other?
Is there any question from the participants, please?
Any other questions? Let me just open the chat box also, if I can.
You can put your question in the chat box also.
Okay, there is a question, I think.